Well, hello friends. Welcome back to the program. Today we are going to continue working on Discord in the Ladybird browser, and it's going to be more work on the login screen. So let me show you where it's currently at after it loads here. So this is what we're currently getting, and we can type into these username and password fields, but as you can see, what I type actually ends up as black text, which doesn't look very good. And if you can even see it, the password is not masked using asterisks or bullets or something. So you can see the password that I'm typing. This isn't very good. So these are the two things that I want to fix today. Getting the right text color to show up so that it looks more like this. And also masking password inputs so that we just show dots or stars or whatever. And I think that will be a good task for the day. So let's start with the color, I guess, because it will be easier to see the password if we get the color right first. Okay, so I think I have a pretty good clue of what the problem is already. So I think we simply don't care about color styling on input fields, or at least we don't care about the foreground color. So I'm just going to construct a simple test page here, color input, and we will make one. Well, hello, friends, and let's style that sucker. So we'll say, have a little background. I don't know, gray, not foreground, but color. Magenta should show up nice and visible. And why don't we slap a 5px solid orange border on there while we're at it, just to see that it works. And color input. Okay, so here's what this should look like in Firefox. Actually, let's make it obnoxiously large while we're at it so that we get something more to work with. Okay, and then let's load this into Ladybird. And actually, both the border and the gray background show up. So that's a good sign. Okay, I actually thought that something wouldn't work, but yeah, the text is not colored. So let's look at the DOM tree. So as you can see here, for input elements that have some kind of text input type, so like input type text, input type password, etc., what we do is we create this shadow tree that is not visible to JavaScript. So like the web page itself can't actually introspect this part. It's just here as an internal implementation detail for how we implement the input element. So we create this user agent shadow root and insert a div which has a bunch of style, and then it has a text node in it. And the text node here, that's the thing that you actually edit when you type into that thing. And then we actually crashed for some reason. That's not very good. But that seems unrelated to the color. I wonder what made us crash there. Yeah, and text input is definitely one of our weaker areas and something that we need to improve. But we need to get that text to get styled. And my hunch about what's going wrong is that we probably don't inherit style across the shadow boundary. So what I mean by that is normally in a web page, style from CSS is inherited through the DOM, right? So you inherit all of the inheritable or inherited properties from your parent element. So the input element inherits all the inherited properties from body, and body inherits from HTML and so forth. And I think what I expect to happen here is that this div that's inside of our internal implementation detail shadow tree, I still expect it to inherit stuff like color from the input element, because we have no way in CSS to grab at the stuff inside of the shadow tree. We could potentially expose it using like pseudo elements or something like that, but the way that websites expect it to work is that if you put a color on your input element, it will show up in the text inside, or show up on the text inside. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. So if we look at the style computer, which is our object that computes style, I would expect to find the inheritance somewhere in the cascade. So we go to compute cascaded values. This is our implementation of the CSS cascade. And let's see, we cascade declarations in the cascade order, sure. And where do we inherit? It is, or inherit, get inherit value. Who calls that? Okay, so if you say explicitly something colon inherit, then we will get the inherited value. But we will also implicitly do it for inherited properties if you don't specify something else. So essentially, this also means, by the way, that style building or style computer runs in a recursive fashion, because in order to compute the style for body, we may need style for HTML to already be in place so that we can inherit from it. So it's just an interesting detail that it happens recursively. So inherit value gets the parent element, and then if we don't have a parent element, or the parent element does not have computed style for whatever reason, then we just use the CSS initial value. Sure, otherwise we grab the value from the parent element. So parent element takes an element, so that's like the current element, we want its parent, and then it takes an optional pseudo element. Right, so I think this is if you have like before or after pseudo element, which would be something, you know, like something like this, then this type of pseudo element that this generates should also inherit from, it should inherit from input, not from the parent of input, I guess. And that's what we see here. Yeah, so if a pseudo element is specified as part of this query, then it inherits from the element, not from its parent. Right. Pseudo elements treat their originating element as their parent. That's a nicer way of saying what I just said. So I think what we want to do here is we want to not just ask for the parent element, but like the parent element or the shadow host if our parent is a shadow root. So we want to ask for like parent or shadow host element, I think, because wait, what is parent or shadow host? Parent or shadow host returns a parent node. Right, because it could potentially be a non-element if your parent is the document node, for example, or a fragment. So I think we want an API like this so that we can ask for either the parent element, or if the parent is a shadow root, we want to ask for the host, which would be this one. So let's invent that API, and I think we can just add it here. Parent or shadow host element. Something like that. And then we'll have to implement that. I'll put it alongside this other thing, parent or shadow host. So this would be something like parent or shadow host element. So if I'm a shadow root, then we should definitely give you the host, just the same as this thing does. Right. We should return element. And if I'm an element, no, hold on. So if there's no parent, then we return null putter. And if we do have a parent, we need to check. So if parent is an element, then return the parent, static casted to an element. If the parent is a shadow root, then return the host. Also, they don't need to verify cast after we already verified with is. Actually, there's no point in that. And if none of these conditions are true, then null putter. Okay, so if we are the shadow root, then the parent or shadow host element is the host. If there is no parent, then there is no parent or shadow host element. If the parent is element, then that element is the parent or shadow host element. And if the parent is shadow root, then the parent or shadow host element is that parent shadow root's host. Otherwise, null putter. Okay, makes sense in my head. I hope I got it right. And then we will say the get parent element here will instead return the parent or shadow host element. So I think we should rename this thing also to element to inherit style from or something like that. Get parent element. Yeah, that's more specific. And then we can, wait, does this need to take null values? It's a little bit weird. Why would it ever take a null value input? Get inherit value. Can you be called with null? Okay, I don't want to unravel that ball of string right now, so let's ignore that for the moment, but it does feel weird that this thing takes a pointer. I don't know why you would ever call here without having an element. But we do null check it here, so strange. Okay, so element to inherit style from, yes. Okay, let's see if this works. It's a bit of a rebuild. Should have known because I edited node.h, which is, of course, aggressively included throughout libweb. There are a couple of those headers in libweb where if you touch them, then you're gonna have to deal with a hefty rebuild. It used to be a lot worse, actually. It used to go upwards of 1,000 files to get rebuilt, but we did a bunch of nice work on reducing shrinking the dependency graph in the generated bindings for JavaScript. So got rid of a couple of hundred compilation units, and that also makes it so that your incremental builds are faster, which I really like. So shout outs to everybody who's been helping make incremental builds faster and smaller. Okay, let's see. So I feel pretty good about this, to the point where I think we can make a commit for adding this API. Parent or shadow host element. DOM node parent or shadow host element. This will be used in style resolution, style computation, to inherit style across shadow tree boundaries. Yes. And I'm sure it has other applications as well. It's a generally useful thing to have. But we have a lot of stuff that we need to do with our shadow trees implementation. Like, we don't really support the shadow DOM as specified. There's like a lot of functionality that we need to implement. And the part of shadow support that I'm using right now, it's like only internal to the engine. So this is not actually exposed to JavaScript, as I was saying earlier. Okay. All right. That is definitely an improvement. Also, it's weird that it shrinks when it's empty. That probably shouldn't do that. I think it should stay the same height, but that's not my problem right now. So let's try the Discord login page, see if this actually just solves the issue with the missing color. I feel like it would. I mean, it's not a complicated problem. It's just, yeah, exactly. So now we got the right color showing up. Very, very good. Let's do a commit here. libweb inherit style across shadow tree boundaries. This makes input text fields have the honor the CSS color or honor this inherit style from the input element. Text in. Okay. That's reasonable. There are probably more specific details about how this should work, and maybe some cases where we need to not cross that boundary. I'm not familiar enough with those specs yet, but as with everything in Serenity OS and Ladybird, we just go incrementally, one step at a time, one day at a time. So this is clearly an improvement. So that's good. And now we need to mask those characters in password fields. So let's see, color input. What did I call that? Input color? Color input. So I guess we can, oh, I already have that open. We can just add a password field to it, because why not? So this will be the username and the passwordo. All right, and of course we need to say that this is type password. Okay, so this is probably not what we want, just to confirm. Also, these, maybe they should be wider by default. I don't know how we're choosing the width. I'm gonna ignore that right now though. The automatic width of input elements, there's probably some algorithm for that we should do. But let's make these things happen. So if we look at the DOM tree, so now we have two input elements, means they both have their own little shadow root with their own little div and text node inside. And there isn't like, or maybe there is, but I'm not aware of like a way in pure CSS to sort of set a mask character for something so that like everything here would be displayed as a different character. But maybe there is such a thing, but I don't know. Regardless, we can do this without CSS since we control the engine. And actually, out of curiosity, is there such a thing? I mean, maybe they don't call it mask character, but how can I mask a span character? Oh, somebody's asking about this. Is there such a thing? WebKit text security. That's interesting. So yeah, maybe WebKit does that with a secret CSS property. We are going to do something simpler right now. So let's just go ahead and have a way to, when we instantiate the shadow tree for an input element, then we can just set like a special property on the text, say that, oh, you're a password input thing, so you have to be masked. Or we can even say, we can assign a special character to it, or a special code point that it has to use as the mask character. So where does this happen? Input element, shadow, create shadow tree if needed. Yeah. So here are non-text inputs. This could definitely be better factored. Input element is pretty hackish at the moment. So here is the text input, what we do for text inputs like text and password. So I think what we're going to do here, as you can see, we're just creating first a shadow root, and then we create an element, put the element inside of the shadow root, add a text node to the element, and so on. So I think for this text node, we can just tell it like, if this is a password thing. So if type is type attribute state password, then set password, or no, not password, set mask character. Yeah, something like this. And then text nodes. Text nodes can have like a little mask character, although I guess they could also just be password. So should mask characters. Maybe that's nicer. I guess I don't need to customize that here. Should mask characters. Is this like, now I'm thinking, am I just choosing this phrase or this terminology, mask characters, in a silly way, and it's going to make people wonder, oh, what's a mask character? And it would be better to just say set is password input, because then it's super unambiguous what it is. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with that. Because then it's much more obvious what this thing is about, even though I think of it in my head as mask characters. Set is password input. Okay. And then what do we do with this information? I guess, well, we can make it, we can take a badge here to clarify that this is not API that you should be calling unless you are input element. Okay. And then when we render text, then we do this thing where we collapse all the white space, and that's done by an API called text for rendering. Text for rendering. Oh no, that's where we store the thing, where we have collapsed it. Where do we store that? Compute text for rendering. Right, so this collapses white space into a single ASCII space if collapse is true. So what we should do here is also convert it to like stars, I guess, if this is a password input thing. So if, let's say, if DOM node is a password input, text for rendering is string repeated. Ooh, this is actually very expressive. So then we'll just say data.length. That's the length of the string that we currently have stored. Oh, is that enough? That would be so cool. Yeah, and like white space collapse should obviously not apply in a password input field, because if you have a password with 2 spaces, we don't want to collapse those into a single space, because that would be very confusing. You know, if you type A space space B, you would get 3 stars, because we think the password for rendering is 3 characters. That would not be good. So let's see if this works out. I feel like it probably will. But come on. Come on. Hey, look at that. That's pretty cool. Okay. So if we dump out the DOM tree, yeah, we can see that there's still text inside of there. Invisible secrets. But you can't see it unless you dump out the DOM. Then, of course, you can see it. So this is cool, but does it work on Discord? That is the big question. It should, but hey, that's cool. Okay, we are basically where I wanted to get today. So that was really smooth and straightforward, actually. Let's do some commits. So actually, that's just one big commit. Web. Render text inside input type password as asterisks. This makes this makes it possible to enter passwords while recording YouTube videos. That seems like a beneficial thing for some people. Okay, so that's great. We are where I wanted to get to. Great progress. So I think we'll end the video of the day here. Happy with this. Let's see what happens if I press login, by the way. I'm guessing it's not going to accept what I just typed here. It didn't like it. Although I did not get an error message or anything either. I'm just failing to load this authentication endpoint, whatever that is. Getting HTTP 400. Anyways, plenty of stuff to do. So that was it for today. Hope you saw something interesting, and thank you very much for hanging out. I will see you next time. Bye.